Good grief, Pete. It's episode 5 of the Constant Geekery Podcast.
Well, slap me with a wet kipper.
I've always seen you more of a halibut, Pete.
Yeah, that's just a red herring, really.
So today we're going to talk about not fish, as it happens, but graphics cards.
Graphics cards. There's a bit of a nautical theme, isn't there, with the Shiver Me Timbers last week. I'll have to think about how we keep this going on. But graphics cards, that's an interesting one, because it's fair to say that is not an area I have a lot of expertise or knowledge in. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at anything, but knowledge in.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert either. I do like gaming, but I had a bit of a gap from PC gaming, and I'll be honest, things have moved on. But I wanted to talk about AMD's new graphics cards, particularly because I feel that AMD have pulled off a bit of a masterstroke.
Have they indeed?
Yeah. So, well, Dr. Lisa Su, who's now in charge of AMD and seems to know exactly what she's doing, presented recently an event called Where Gaming Begins, where they released the new AMD Zen 3 CPU architecture. And these CPUs, which actually will hit the market on Thursday this week, November the 5th, look very exciting. Intel beating, and clearly have got Intel worried. Perhaps we'll talk about that at the end. Okay. Then last week on Wednesday, they had the Where Gaming Begins Episode 2 event where they launched their new graphics cards. So these are the 6000 series graphics cards, called Big Navi with the RDNA 2 architecture.
Okay, so like I say, don't know a lot about graphics cards and gaming, but obviously we were talking about nVidia cards a week or so ago. Yeah. So yes, I remember us talking about Big Navi. So this should be an interesting chat.
I think so. We'll cover some of the technical bits, but I'm more interested in that angle of AMD pulling one out of the hat.
So sort of more the business strategy and that kind of thing, really.
Yes, although I'm super excited by the potential with all of this stuff. It's tech, and I get excited by tech. 2020 is the year of the gamer. That's what AMD have been saying.
Well, a lot of people have been saying things about 2020, so yeah, that's a slightly more positive spin on the year. So yeah, why not? The year of the gamer.
And of course, it's marked by the next generation consoles. So we've got the Xbox Series X coming out and the PlayStation 5. And of course, both of these are powered by AMD system on chips.
Yeah, I noticed
with the RDNA 2 architecture.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So here's the goal. They when they released RDNA, so that was the 5000 series cards, they were hoping for a 50% generational improvement over the previous architecture, which was GCN.
Yeah. Okay.
So then they're aiming to do the same thing again, basically another 50% improvement with RDNA 2 over RDNA. And that improvement they're targeting is in performance per watt. So getting more performance
from the same amount of power.
That's it.
Got you. Okay.
And they suggest that their compute units are 30% more efficient using the same 7 nanometer process.
Okay, so that's quite a step up.
I think it's pretty amazing, yeah. Especially if the process size hasn't changed. Obviously, that is TSMC 7 nanometer process.
Same place Apple are using for their silicon.
Now, part of this improvement they've achieved is due to something they call infinity cache. So just like very fast cache RAM on a CPU, they're now putting very fast cache RAM on the GPU. 128 megabytes of it.
Whoa.
Which is quite a lot. And this basically minimizes latency and improves performance.
Right, yeah. Cache always does that, so the more you have, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's for listeners who perhaps are less technically minded, what this does, CPUs or GPUs, a processor basically has to work in conjunction with memory. If you can get that memory to be a lot faster, then your processor is going to be quicker. So cache RAM is very expensive, and it sits on the same chip and is incredibly quick. So you can get massive performance benefits by putting cache RAM in.
Okay.
So that's how they're achieving some of this, and they have actually achieved, they said, a 54% performance per watt improvement again.
That's staggering.
It is staggering, actually. It's amazing progress, and they're sort of trying to catch up to nVidia, and that's a big job.
Yeah, well, they've been playing catch up, or they've certainly been far behind for some time, as we discussed in the nVidia video podcast.
So let's say a few more things about the card. Something that they did announce is they've partnered with Microsoft, with DirectX 12, and they're using DX ray tracing.
Okay.
So these cards will support ray tracing.
Awesome. And
variable rate shading. They don't do it the same way that nVidia does, but let's be clear here, nVidia didn't invent ray tracing. It's not something it's
been around for a while, hasn't it?
Well, decades.
Yeah.
But obviously it's only just getting to the point where these processors have enough power to do it in real time at the kind of resolutions that we're running.
And just to be clear, again, perhaps for those like myself out there who didn't previously know what ray tracing is used for?
So it's just a mapping what happens with light. So if you can imagine, where does this light go? What shadows does it create? How does it reflect? Those kind of things.
Okay, so that is quite computationally intensive to actually work that out in real time, which makes more sense as to why it's only been something that's a thing available more recently, just because of the power required to do that.
Yeah. You're
essentially modelling reality.
That's it. And it actually is quite subtle, because things already look very realistic using existing sort of shadow mapping techniques. But it's subtle, but it is certainly better. It's more realistic. So quite exciting. AMD are claiming on average they've got twice the performance of previous generation cards at 4K resolutions.
Wow.
So if you're into 4K gaming, I think it's fair to say, I have a gaming rig with a 5700 XT in.
Mm-hmm. Can you run that at 4K?
Yeah, you can.
But should you?
Well, it depends on the game.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
so I'm showing my lack of understanding here a bit.
It's a little bit lacking in horsepower for the latest AAA titles at that kind of resolution. 1440p is fine for that.
Okay.
Something else AMD said as well, they're not sitting still. RDNA 3 is already in progress.
Right.
So this is quite exciting, because it looks like the culmination of a master plan. Getting those chips into the consoles, as we'll talk about in a minute, launching the graphics cards and the CPUs all at the same time.
Well, colour me intrigued. I'm interested to hear what this is then.
Okay, well, let's start with the first card they announced. Let's talk about the cards specifically. So we've got the RX 6800 XT.
Okay.
And
is that the equivalent to the RTX 3080?
That's what they're targeting, yeah. Okay. So that's their numbering convention. Obviously, last year, they only got up to the 5700, or an equivalent to the 2070. So lots of people were expecting them to try and go that one step higher and compete with NVIDIA's 80 series cards, as in 3080, 2080, you know what I mean. So they appear to have done it. AAA games run at 4K with the highest settings.
Impressive.
These cards have 16 gigs of RAM, so that's up from the 8 that's in the 5700. More RAM is good. 128 megabyte Infinity cache, which we mentioned, and it's achieving all of this with 300 watts.
Wow. So just to put that in context, the 3080 is 320 watts. So it's giving comparable performance, or I know we'll talk about that a bit in a minute, for 20 less watts.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. But keep that figure of 300 watts in mind for later. So what they're saying is it delivers more than 60 frames per second at 4K, and often well beyond. I mean, all we've got to go on at the moment is AMD's own benchmarks, but I'd assume those are correct, because they're going to quickly have egg on their face if they weren't.
Well, quite. As we said in the nVidia, they know what benchmarks everyone out there is going to do, so they're not going to.
Yeah.
It's not like a rolling road where you can claim different 0 to 60s from what you get in real life.
That's it. So sometimes it's 60 frames per second, but often well beyond. I'm sure on a couple of them they're over 100 frames per second. And these are on, AAA titles. When they compare it to the RTX 3080, it's very similar. Some slight wins for the 3080, some slight losses for the 3080 at both 4K and 1440p resolutions. So broadly, very similar in performance, definitely a competitor.
Yeah.
But then AMD pulled out this extra stuff. So something they're calling rage mode.
Hold the phone. Rage what now?
Rage mode.
That's normally what happens when I can't get an order through on Tesco's and just keep clicking the button.
Yeah. I imagine lots of people who've been buying NVIDIA cards have been experiencing some sort of rage mode as well.
No doubt, yeah. I've seen some interesting thoughts on that.
Well, the idea is it's one click to overclock the card.
Okay.
And it's... they described it, and to be honest, I can't remember, but it seemed to be using some sort of AI to optimize the card on the fly to give the absolute maximum performance possible. But before you get too excited, we're talking about maybe adding 1 to 2% to the performance.
Right, okay.
However, they then spoke about something else as well, which could potentially take that a bit further. Mm-hmm. And this is something they're calling AMD Smart Access Memory.
Oh, right. So what's that when it's at home?
Well, it relies upon the new Zen 3 CPUs. So these are the Ryzen 5000 series CPUs, and you'll need a motherboard with the appropriate chipset, 500 series chipset.
Okay.
If you have those two things, and you have one of these new 6000 series graphics card, goodness me, all these numbers, you can switch on Smart Access Memory. And again, I can't remember how this works exactly, but it basically seems to circumvent the limitations of PCI Express and allows a better or more optimized access to memory. I can't remember which way round it goes, whether the GPU is accessing system RAM or vice versa. I'll be honest, I wasn't paying a lot of attention because it's not something I'd ever use.
Like I say, this is an area that I don't hold a huge amount of knowledge in. Cut to the chase. Give me the bottom line. Okay. When you switch all those things on, then what happens?
Well, it beats the 3080 comfortably. That gives you just enough of an edge to ensure that the 6800 XT wins.
Wow. Really?
However, let's be realistic here. A lot of people who are going to buy these graphics cards won't have a 5000 series CPU. Those that buy the graphics card and the 5000 series CPU will not necessarily be changing their motherboard as well, because you can run those Zen 3 CPUs on the older boards. So I think for most people,
they're not going to be able to access that feature.
No. So I don't think we should consider that. So just take that out of the equation. When the card is being run in standard mode, it's broadly similar.
It's comparable. Yeah, you're getting some wins, some losses.
So they did lots of talking about latency reduction. They said something like up to 37%. But again, this is using AMD specific functions in the drivers, things like anti-lag. And I've tried running those things on my machine. I haven't really noticed a lot of difference, but maybe that's the type of games I play.
Yeah.
I don't really play the first-person shooter types where latency and frame rates are more critical if you're playing those online.
Okay.
Again, we've got the ray tracing support, DirectX 12 Ultimate, and something that AMD are calling FidelityFX. So this is their onboard suite of tools that are available for developers to use, which includes the ray tracing and other bits and pieces as well. And they've already got 35 games that support these features.
Wow.
And they've been collaborating with game developers to achieve that.
Okay.
So net result is more realistic lighting, more realistic shadow casting, and from the demos I've seen, it looks really good.
So a more immersive experience when you're playing games.
That's it. Now those developers are using FidelityFX also in the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X.
I think I see where your master plan comment is tying in.
Think about it. The developers go out and make a game for the consoles. They optimize it using AMD specific features. When they come to make the PC version, you've already got an optimized.
And that is a bit of a masterstroke, because often platforms live or die by the games.
Yeah.
And how developers support them. In fact, platforms in general live or die by the software on them. Games are software. So, if you've got more adoption of those features across the big titles, that's really appealing.
It is. Although, let's just be clear and not get overexcited here. The developers are not going to ignore nVidia cards when they're developing these games. They will go all out to make sure they run really well on nVidia, because the vast majority of gamers are running on nVidia.
At the moment.
At the moment, I'd probably still for a while yet, if we're honest. But AMD have brought something to the table. And, where AMD has previously fallen down a little bit, I think, is in its drivers are inferior to nVidia.
Okay.
It just, I can't ever put my finger on it, but it's just, things just don't run quite smoothly on AMD cards. When I say smoothly, I'm not talking about the frame rates. I'm just talking about the number of issues that you encounter when you're running games.
Okay. Yeah.
That's just my personal experience, and it is what it is. Anyway, you want one of these cards. November 18 is launch day, and they are coming out at $649.
Okay.
So they are undercutting the RTX 3080.
All right, by about $50.
Well, it depends if you're looking at an actual properly retail priced RTX 3080 or a ridiculously eBay scalped version.
That never happens. eBay's a paradigm of business virtue. But that, of course, assumes you can buy a 3080 at all.
Yeah, interestingly, our designer just told me earlier he's in the queue with Gigabyte to get a 3080 card, and last week he was something like 341 in the queue, and now he's 320 something a week later. So they're not shipping them out with any kind of alacrity.
It sounds like being at a theme park ride in the middle of summer.
Lots of queuing.
Yeah.
So who knows? I think it would be unrealistic to expect AMD not to have the same problems. They are making a generational leap in the same way that nVidia is, so there will be a desire for these cards, and people will be buying them because they can't get the nVidia ones. So I suspect exactly the same thing will happen regardless of how many AMD has made.
Although, from what you're telling me so far, they might have made some, whereas nVidia made obviously the 3 and they got sold out.
Well, and perhaps we now know why nVidia didn't bother making so many. Anyway, let's move on. There's another card, which is the RX 6800. So AMD uses the XT moniker to denote something that's, top of the range.
It's like the GTI.
Performance. That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
So the standard 6800 has the same RAM and cache, but it runs at 250 watts.
Okay.
They're still saying, though, it's got more performance than a 2080 Ti.
Really? Okay.
And can still achieve 60 frames per second at 4K in most games.
So that sounds like a pretty good option.
Pretty good option, although it's not that much cheaper. It's available at $579, so you're saving yourself $70. Again, comes out on November 18. But if if you're on a budget, and if you want the latest 6000 series, for instance, but you're going to be gaming at 1440p or even 1080p, why would you bother going for the XT? You might as well just have the 6800.
Yeah, or often in my experience, when you want something, when you're an enthusiast at anything, you have your budget, and then something comes out that's perhaps a bit above your budget, you might stretch for it. This might be that $579 might be a stretch for some to just get that bit extra, but the extra $70 would just be way out of reach. So, yeah, fair play. And to be fair, if you're getting more performance than a 2080 Ti, that's still a massive saving over buying one of those, which I still think they're about $1,000 or more.
Yeah, they are. Obviously, the new nVidia cards are, I think, the 3080 outperforms that 2080 Ti, doesn't it? And perhaps even actually, doesn't the 3070 outperform the 2080 Ti in some cases? Not sure.
I have to check.
Certainly, anyway, that price is a bit of a misnomer, I guess, because it's, the pricing is changing, and I suspect nVidia might have to respond because of what happened next in the event.
What happened next in the event?
Well, it was a case of let's now pass back to Dr. Lisa Su to wrap things up. And she wrapped things up by casually...
I smell and one more thing.
Yeah, she did a casual one more thing by dropping the RX 6900 XT. So I was very much expecting them to bring out something to compete with the 3080. Mm-hmm. I thought bringing out something to compete with the 3090 was probably a bit of a stretch, but they've done it. And they seem to be working some kind of miracle, because the 6900 XT card is still 300 watts.
Really?
AMD are saying they've got a 65% performance per watt improvement.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So how are they doing that?
No idea.
Like you say, that's almost magical.
Special sauce.
Mm.
Anyway, they showed some benchmarks where it is like the other card, very competitive with the RTX 3090. But when you look at the benchmark charts, there is a caveat on that.
Oh, can I guess?
Yeah.
You have to have rage mode and the smart access memory.
That's it.
Shenanigans turned on, which means you need to potentially invest in a new CPU and motherboard.
Yeah, so what I read from that is that it's almost competitive with an RTX 3090 if you factor those things out, which is what we said we were going to do. But it's obviously going to be very close because rage mode and smart access is, you may be talking 5 to 7% performance improvement. So it's very close to the level of an RTX 3090. And here's the kicker. Launches December the 8th at $999.
Whoa, that's like $500 cheaper than the nVidia 3090.
It is $500 cheaper.
Now we know why they didn't make too many cards.
Yeah. What will nVidia do about that? Will they drop the price? Who knows? So, very exciting. And I do think a masterstroke by AMD. Just think about all of these things coming together at the same time. They knew their system on chip was going to be in the next generation consoles, so they've had plenty of time to develop it and the architecture. They've obviously been working on this architecture for a long time. They have brought out these CPUs then that are delivering better performance. The new people are very excited about the new Ryzen 5950X, which by all accounts is going to be faster than the best from Intel. When I say the best from Intel, I'm talking about consumer chips, the i9, 10900K, that kind of range. And I think it's really exciting. I've been thinking about building another PC mainly for video editing, but let's be honest, if I'm going to chuck anything like a 6900 in it, I'm going to do some gaming on it as well.
It would be rude not to.
Just think about the price, Sophie. I think that 5950X chip, I'm sure it was either $800 or $850, getting you a 16-core, 32-thread processor that, is basically the fastest thing out there for consumers in gaming. Combined with a 6900 XT, you're under $2,000. Yeah, okay, you still got to buy your motherboard and case and stuff, but what's the total cost of building that system? $3,000 maybe? And what will it be capable of?
Well, it will be, we use this term a lot, but it will be a beast.
Yeah.
It will be a beast.
So I might do that. I don't know. I have to count the pennies and...
well, you've got some Apple Silicon to be buying soon. So.
Yeah, I might not be able to do it. We'll see.
Maybe I should do it.
Perhaps you should.
Do a series on someone who's not done gaming with any anger for a while, trying to work out how to build a PC for the first time in about 15 years.
That'd be good. I suspect you'd have to do a bit of liquid cooling as well with this, so it'll be an interesting build. Anyway, we're digressing. AMD, masterstroke, great business skill, clearly have got the competition worried. So first of all, nVidia obviously seeded 3070 cards to the YouTubers and reviewers Monday, Tuesday last week, with the AMD announcement on the Wednesday and the 3070 supposedly going on sale on the Thursday.
Right.
And of course, the 1380 launches and the 3090 launches have been plagued by issues with bots and scalpers. And
I read a hugely entertaining real-time blog on that of someone trying to order an RTX 3070. I'll just read the title. NVIDIA's RTX 3070 pre-orders were pure hell, so I live blogged. I hope you enjoy my suffering. It is well worth a read. It's very entertaining. Poor guy, just trying to desperately buy one of these.
I'll tell you what, if you're watching on YouTube, that's youtube.com/Constant Geekery. We'll put a link to this blog in the description because it is entertaining reading, and we won't spoil it for you in that case.
No.
Suffice it to say that the same issues exist, and I did have a quick spin around eBay just to see whether there were any 3070 cards going for inflated prices.
No, an inflated price.
Loads of them.
Yeah.
Loads of them, all at inflated prices, basically more than the selling point for the 3080. And people are buying them. People are bidding on these things. I don't really understand that. There we go. Must be so desperate to have that extra few frames per second, or the bragging rights.
Or a bit of both.
Anyway, masterstroke by AMD. They've got Intel worried as well. Intel has conveniently started talking about its 11th gen architecture, which is
that's at least 6 months away.
At least, yeah.
That is desperate.
Nor does it offer anything new. It can't possibly be offering anything new.
Well, what amazes me is they're still struggling with their 10 nanometer process, aren't they? And AMD and nVidia, for that matter, and Apple, they're all using TSMC's 7 nanometer process. Now, I know then there's not a direct correlation because I think Intel's density is higher on the 10 nanometer, but then they're still having trouble with that, aren't they? So it really feels like Intel have got some catching up to do. But from what you've described, AMD, what it feels like is, for those of you who've watched Top Gear, or in fact any kind of drag race where you see one car pulling out in front, you think they've got this drag race, and that would be nVidia. And then suddenly from behind, this other car, the AMD in this case, is catching up and giving the lead car a run for its money. Now, I'm sure nVidia have got other things planned. They're not going to sit on their laurels, but it certainly makes for an interesting and entertaining spectacle watching these two giants really battle it out in terms of dominance, and I'm sure more to come on that.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. I think AMD have got the measure of Intel, and they're competing with them. There are still areas where Intel are ahead, probably, but AMD will catch them. nVidia haven't been complacent. They've been working really hard, and let's be clear here: nVidia can produce a faster gaming card than AMD can. There will be a TI version coming and other things. But I think what's interesting is AMD have narrowed the gap more than people might have expected. And they've got these other things going for them. Being on the consoles, that's actually turned out to be quite a winning decision, I would say.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Anyway, we'll wrap up this podcast. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that little adventure into graphics cards from two people who probably are not that familiar with graphics cards. But
I know nothing.
I think from the perspective of people who are entertained by computing moving on steps, for a long time it's been very incremental improvements. But now we've got things moving on a bit more, and we've got genuine competition coming into the marketplace. And that means that you, the consumer, win. And that's a great place to be. We've just entered lockdown, or we're about to enter lockdown here in the UK. So we're going to film another podcast episode today, which will be out next week. After that, we're going to have to work out some sort of Zoom podcasting. So
we'll do it. We'll make it happen.
We'll try our best. So stay safe out there, folks. We appreciate you watching very much. If you're watching on YouTube, please consider giving the channel a subscribe. We'd love to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I thought that would
awesome.
I thought it might have been possible, but it's looking less likely. YouTube doesn't like featuring my content, apparently. Anyway, hopefully we did enough to earn a thumbs up or a like on whatever platform you're listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Constant Geekery Podcast.
Cheerio.